Welcome to Impolite Society. I'm Rachel.
And I'm Laura.
And we're the podcast that tackles those taboo topics you can't discuss in polite society. Every once in a while, I stumble upon a topic that I think is going to be light and fun. And then I start chasing it. I start pulling those threads and it ends up breaking my brain and being like the worst thing in the world. And this is one of those topics.
Bummer index.
It sneaks up on you. Who would have thought? Sex sounds. Oh, that should be fun and light. Horrible. And the exact train of thought I got to this pace today is I saw some TikTok, as I do, right? And it was talking about some law that had to be passed because everybody was just spanking each other all the time in medieval Europe. And I'm like, that's hilarious. Let's learn about that. Let's start digging into it. Unfortunately, I could not find anything about it online.
Because TikTok fucking made it up. You know it.
I'm sure they did. But here I am thinking, this is delightful. This is going to be a great summer short. But I found something else that I, in theory, thought was going to be just as outrageous and hilarious. And it made me physically ill at some times when I was doing this research. Yeah, so R.I.P. my faith in humanity, guys, because this one was a doozy.
That's Impolite Society in a nutshell.
This is one of those things. It started with spanking. Spanking! Isn't that like such a lighthearted topic? I mean, it's not something that you think would send you into the bowels of humanity, but here we go. I do think this deserves an overall deep dive when we get back to our full-length episodes in the fall, because there's still so many questions I have about the subject as a whole, and we are only scratching the surface. Or should I say, we're only doing a few open-handed whops. We'll save a full belting for later.
Belting.
Get a lot of that ready, because there's going to be a lot of that more coming. Before we begin, be sure to... Okay, I'm new. We're new to YouTube. Before we begin, be sure to smash that subscribe button and give us a like and comment. We want to hear your thoughts, so let us know what you think about today's episode in the comments below. And I think that covers our obligatory YouTube piece, right? Hit the bell, smash subscribe, like, comment.
Is it really smash? Do we have to say? Okay, we'll just say smash. It's fine. Smash.
Smash it like it's your naughty wife's behind. Bam! Let's go!
And welcome to our new listeners. We got some emails lately from fans of Time Suck that have been listening. Our download numbers have definitely shown that there has been some people who have found us. So congratulations. Welcome. Thank you for being here. And I just want to say, what is big deal? If you know, you know. Anyway, on we go.
Now to some spanking. Some spanking studies, to be specific. Because in my initial dive, I did not find the topic I was looking for, but I did stumble upon something called Christian domestic discipline. Have you heard of this, Laura?
I had not before reading your research. The term itself kind of gives itself away. It's someone who is Christian disciplining a household. And because it's Christian, I can assume it's a male, right, who's running the domicile. Like, that is the traditional hierarchy. He's the one doling out the discipline. So my initial take, it's either beating his kids or beating his wife. Also, Christian kind of annotates that it's not the super fun kind of spanking. It's discipline, but like not in play.
And that's exactly what it is, right? Good job deducing, Laura. A+ on your context clues and observation of the world and how people live in it.
Thanks!
This thing really had a moment, and a lot of the research I found was like from 2016, so I don't know if it's kind of like trickled off from there.
Interesting.
But it was not something I had heard of either before this research, which is why it piqued my interest so much. So as a whole, domestic discipline is a consensual relationship that involves one partner being dominant and the other partner being submissive. How is that different from a traditional dom-sub dynamic? Well, if you remember back to our BDSM episode, I feel like a lot of those dynamics were happening in scenes, right? So you would have a scene, you'd act it out, and then you'd go back to your normal life. These people are committed. They live like this 24/7, hence the domestic part.
Okay, so it's a lifestyle. Like, it's literally like in every single thing that they do. So you're living like you're in 1950s America. The leader is the man. He's in charge of all things, and a woman is not the equal partner in this equation, right?
That is how the Christians, those good Christians, set it up. The wider perspective of a domestic discipline relationship can actually have those roles reversed, or they can be same sex.
So what you're saying is domestic discipline can be an aspect of BDSM.
BDSM. They walk a very similar line. They edge the same line, right?
Interesting.
So it's described as like kind of a balance between like that sexy BDSM dynamic, but also like a form of couples counseling. It's weird, right? Because it just helps couples work better together.
Clear hierarchies always help me work better together.
Right. That's why there's not 5 CEOs of a company. But if you're going to understand how these relationships works, you got to have to learn about the lingo too, right? Because the two most important terminologies is the HOH, which
I was thought you were going to say HOA.
Talk about domestic discipline. If your grass is too long, you're going to get punished. But the HOH, aka head of household, that's your dominant partner. That's the one who's running the show. And then you have your more submissive partner, who is referred to as taken in hand, TIH. And I want you to guess, like, what do you think taken in hand means?
Okay, so like taken in hand as in like I take you under my care in my hand, or literally taken in hand as in I take your booty in my hand as I smack it.
Yeah, that is what I think it means. You are taking my hand on your body. Because that is the main punishment that is described for this style of relationship. Now, the ideal here is that a domestic discipline relationship is caring, consensual, and consistently uses like this fair structure of accountability and discipline in a loving and positive way to kind of enhance communication, deepen intimacy, and reinforce relationship intimacy.
So again, it's more of like a BDSM version of couples counseling.
Yes.
Somebody feels taken care of. The other person feels like they're in charge of their well-being.
That's exactly it. And that's what the goal is, to create a more harmonious couple by these kind of clear power structures and these clear rules that everybody is living by, even though it's only really enforced for one person. So outside of that domestic discipline lifestyle, you can actually add another flair to it with the Christian domestic discipline. And now this is the relationship that has all of those elements, and that is blended with the traditional male-led Christian ideal of what marriage should be. In a CDD, Christian domestic discipline household, the husband has the ultimate authority. He decides the schedules, the rules, what's cleaned, when, and how often, how money is spent, etc. And this role is anointed by God himself. And when the rules he lays out are not followed, he is allowed, nay, encouraged to use corporal punishment on the perpetrators. But who polices the police here? I'm sure that's the first thought that pops into your head, because it was up there with me, and a lot of people asked that question online to those in the community, like, who holds your husband accountable, right? If he's holding you accountable. Well, that is, of course, God, our big imaginary friend in the clouds, right? He is the one who the man of the house answers to. So you can imagine how that goes.
So it's basically like you live in the 1900s, right? This is a tried and true version of household that we've seen before.
So of the rules that the husband makes, the most important follow the big D.
The big D's.
Wait. Yeah, as I should say, the 4 big D's. There's multiple of them.
I've only got 2.
That sounds... So in this case, the 4 D's stand for disobedience, disrespect, dishonesty, and dangerous. As in, like, you're not following a doctor's orders, you're driving crazily, you're doing something that might put yourself at risk. And they see this as like, oh, because you're so valuable to your man, he doesn't want you to be risking yourself, so then he can then smack you, give you a good spanking for putting your life at risk. But I want to also point out that I'm sure if you're going to start pointing out health things like doctor's orders, I think this very easily dances into the realm of what she should and shouldn't be eating. So that if you have like dessert when your husband wants you to be dropping some pounds, you're like, well, you're putting yourself at danger by being unhealthy. So I'm going to spank you for sneaking cookies after you thought I was asleep.
Ugh. I mean, or disobedience in terms of like health decisions, right? About having children and those kinds of things. Like that's a whole other can of worms. Ugh.
You're expected to just follow what they say at all times. Like that is the foundation of these relationships.
No, thank you.
Jesus. Yeah, that's the first of many Jesuses, like, that are to come. And these, of course, are the most important rules, which cover a lot of things. And if you accidentally break one of these many, many rules, you are going to get the harshest punishment, which is none other than spanking.
Of course it is.
Why not? Why not? But also why? Just in general, why spanking? And that was the question that I found myself asking over and over again as I did this research. Why not a slap across the face? Why not pinching them really hard? Why not a purple nurple? I don't know. Why is this specific action? And I mean, it wasn't mentioned anywhere, but I think we all have our guesses as to why spanking is the punishment of choice.
Because it's kind of sexy, right?
It's the thing I saw over and over again is that it's going to hurt without doing serious damage. It's a part of the body that people aren't going to see.
Yeah.
And it's humiliating to pull your pants down in front of somebody else and have your butt and genitals exposed. Yeah, it's not good things.
Bumper index.
Yeah, there's a lot to unpack here. And the most critical one might be, how does one spank a wife, right? You know,
I've got some suggestions.
We've all heard of spanking, and some of us may have been spanked as children, and there's, of course, many different methods for spanking. Over the clothes, under the clothes, go out in the yard and grab a switch, all that kind of fun. But luckily, for spanking a wife, there are a few go-to sources online that will help you take control of your household and bring it into order with step-by-step directions to discipline your loving life partner. For Jesus, of course.
Well, of course. A horse is a course.
And Jesus wants you to spank your wife. So one of the blogs I read, I'm not going to cite it. I got this idea from one of the blogs I read while doing the research, is she did not cite where she got the information from because she didn't want to send people there. And I was like, fair enough. I'm not going to cite these folks either. Just trust that they are out there. They're not hard to find if you do want to. But, I mean, this isn't a fucking scientific article. This is some weirdo online trying to tell people how to spank people.
No peer reviews here.
Laura, I'm going to ask that you read these directions in your best, like, proper British Emily Post manners. Like you're teaching etiquette. And go!
The best position will be for you to sit at the end of the bed or on a chair with no arms and have her lay across your lap. She can also bend over a bed with arms tucked under her chest and your left hand on the small of her back. If a strap, belt, is to be implemented, watch that each stroke falls directly on the buttocks and not higher. A fucking belt?
I mean, it's not just enough to beat your wife with your own personage. You have to bring in instruments to increase the pain, right? Because this is a punishment. You have to remember, first and foremost, this is a punishment. And it's not a fun bedroom spanking. And that is very, very clear in the directions as they continue. Please go on, Miss Beltington.
A fearful wife may begin crying or pleading and find it difficult to remain still. Reassure her of your intent and love. Yes, this will hurt. That is why it is a punishment. Then instruct her to be still. Remind her that she is not in control of this discipline. You should continue the lashing through her tears and pleas for you to stop. Jesus fucking Christ. Until you are certain that the message was received. This will ensure her remorse and therefore stop the undesirable behavior. A sound lashing is 5 to 10 strokes with your hand and 3 to 5 strokes with a strap. Some wives need more. To avoid bruising, do not strike the same area in repetition. Gauge your decision to proceed based upon your wife's readiness to repent. What the fuck?
Can you see why I had such a hard time with this research?
I mean, this is domestic violence in quite a pure form. This is the shit that got killed back in the 60s, right? So you beat them until you think that they're sorry enough. What the fuck does that even mean?
And I would be one of them that was literally killed because I cannot imagine crying in this situation. I would rather die than let my husband, not my husband.
Anybody.
Think that they, I don't know.
Power over you or that you, same. I'm in the exact same camp.
I was sure you would be, but I was like, I'm like, who are these women? No, please don't. I would not give them the satisfaction.
Yeah, you fight. It's your fight reaction. And again, that's what got kids killed. And wives really hurt because if you don't submit instantaneously, they have to escalate the violence to overpower you. And then it becomes dangerous.
Unfortunately, spanking your wife is not only applicable when she does something wrong, but in a Christian domestic discipline household, to keep your wife in that good old submissive frame of mind, there's also these things called maintenance spankings, which are essentially where the husband just wails on his wife for no reason. It's just like a scheduled, reoccurring spanking. Like, you know what? It's been a while since you fucked up. I actually need you to come over here and so I can wail on you. Just to remind you.
Again, that's classic domestic abuse. Abuser has to keep his victim guessing at all times. Off balance, no security. But scheduled, that makes me think maybe something else is going on.
And you might be surprised to hear that in my research, where I was like poking around on some of the forums or the subreddits for these communities, women were the ones asking for these spankings, these maintenance spankings. There's a whole lot of psychology here, folks.
Let's stick a pin in that for later.
But have no fear, because if you want to spare the rod, if you're maybe a weak-willed man with your weak-willed woman, and you don't really like beating the shit out of her, there are other ways you may discipline your wife, ranging from earlier bedtimes to no TV, can't watch her favorite shows. Those are the lighter end. On the more extreme end, there is cutting her off from leaving the house, taking away her privileges to transportation, access to the internet, or even finances. Take away her money, cut her allowance for the week. There's also this really weird punishment of having to kneel by the bed until the man gives her permission to get into it. So like they go to bed at the same time and she just has to kneel next to it until he says she can get in. And I was like, that's very odd to me.
I've read about this in books in the 60s, kind of about child abuse. So you could also have your wife kneel on grits or cornmeal if you want to make it extra painful to her knees. Woof.
Fun! And your husband can make you do it if he doesn't like the tone you take with him.
I would be fucking corn all over the place. So much corn!
We're keeping Orville Reichenbacher in business. Anyways, this all is kind of fucked, right? Like, can we just say that? So far, this is pretty fucked.
Kind of fucked? Yeah, it's super fucked.
So these people, they really believe that this is how God wants us to live, right? This is how God has structured a family.
People can believe anything that they want to believe, right?
And I think that is exactly what's happening here. So let's dive into the theology behind it. And like, I mean, shocker to no one, I am no theologian, but here's my take. The Bible is like clouds. If you look at it long enough, you start seeing all the pretty shapes and things that you want to see.
Mm-hmm.
But there is a case to be made by folks who walk the walk of this lifestyle, and they were made very clear in several blogs and educational resources. And I'm going to give you a quick recap of what they say, and I'm going to keep it brief because I doubt anybody clicks on a taboo podcast to hear scripture. But here I go. Okay. Have you heard that God is the Father and we are his children?
Many times.
Wrong. Well, that is wrong according to these people, because apparently God is a husband and we are his little wifey. We're his little boo things. Okay. And that is illustrated in Isaiah 54:5. Whatever. God said to Israel, "For thy maker is thy husband, the Lord of hosts is his name, and thy Redeemer, the Holy One of Israel, the God of the whole earth shall be called." I guess the key point there is thy maker is thine husband.
And I feel like I kind of remember this from Catholic school. That's why premarital sex is actually against the Ten Commandments, even though it's not in the Ten Commandments at all. The idea is that you're married to God, and so you shouldn't covet another man's wife, aka a person who's not your spouse, who is a wife-y of God. Like, I do remember this like strange tripped out logic about premarital sex because none of it actually fucking makes sense. Like you said, big puffy clouds, you see what you want to see, you just say whatever you want to say to rationalize the behavior you want to see.
Exactly. And the fact that these are not, oh, well, watch out for lightning bolts, because here comes the hot take. These are not words that are etched down directly by God. These are things that were written thousands of years ago, then translated.
Yeah.
And they're translated
100%.
by bored little monks, right? And then put into English by some heretic in the 1500s.
Dude, if that earns me a lightning bolt, fucking bring it on. Give me that fucking lightning bolt to having critical thinking and a knowledge of history.
Well, right. And then I think some of them take license with it. They're trying to spice it up. They're trying to entertain themselves.
Totally.
So here is a line from Jeremiah was a bullfrogette at 3:20, and it says, "Surely as a wife treacherously departeth from her husband, so have ye dealt treacherously with me, O house of Israel, saith Lord." And I'm going to go out here and say that this does not sound like a verbatim, but it sounds maybe like a rhetorical device or a literary device that we all learned about in 8th grade called a simile.
Yeah.
Something is as this is as
I remember
is as
those on the ACTs.
And then finally in Deuteronomy, some numbers, God speaks of his humbling and chastening of his wife. He was chastening his wife, the nation of Israel, as one would a child. That's the Cliff Notes version. I'm tired of reading Bible shit. And chasten, to give you all heathens an idea of what it means correction, punishment, rebuke, reprimand, or berate. Anyways, it's a correction. It's a punishment, right?
Okay.
And we all know, as it talks about before, saying that he's gonna chasten his wife like he does his child. We all know what the Bible says about beating the most vulnerable among us, aka children, right? What's the one Bible verse that comes top of mind whenever we talk about beating children?
Spare the rod, spoil the child.
So buckle in, right? Because here's how all those thoughts connect. All those random 5 sentences, tops, connect in a simple equation. God, husband. Nation of Israel, wife. But God punished Israel like child. Therefore, husband must be able to punish wife like child. Boom. That's literally it.
I'm thinking that there's got to be something else afoot here. Like, we've kind of touched on it. That's my thought.
Oh, there's definitely a lot more going on, and the Bible is being used as that sticky little Band-Aid to cover up why they want to be doing it. Yeah. And it's interesting, too, because this role is supposed to be for the whole family. But when you look in the context of this Christian domestic discipline, sure, they say, like, yeah, probably you could beat your kids, but that's not who they're talking about in all of these blogs, podcasts, and subreddits. This makes me ask the very obvious question. Like, this is about spanking your wife. Like, it's a sex thing, right? This is a sex thing. Can we just, like, say it's a kink? Can't you just say you like power dynamics, you like BDSM? Why do we have to bring Jesus into the equation?
I have thoughts on that, but I also want to ask, is there a subreddit for this specifically? Because Reddit is not a place where whack job religious people hang out. The idea, if there are a lot of them on Reddit, kind of lends credence to this is just a kinky sex thing. Because Bible study is not a super popular subreddit. I spent a lot of time on Reddit. I should know.
The subreddit that I went to, it was more specific to just overall domestic discipline. But I think I was just trying to understand the mindset. So this was the only way to really, like, be taught.
Voice of the people, right?
Yeah. And this is where my mental health really started to suffer, Laura, because not only is there, like, domestic discipline, the subreddit, and you read about all the stuff there, then there's people posting AMAs, there's people posting in, like,
and these are all domestic discipline in the BDSM lifestyle, right?
Well, I mean, it probably correlates at some point, right? There's probably some overlap. There's no specific one for Christian domestic discipline.
Okay.
And I'm sure people in the lifestyle will tell you they're vastly different, but there's definitely, because what do you find in there? A lot of women being the subordinate to the man and that kind of stuff. So it's just like the same. It feels the same.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it was on Reddit that I saw the throwback that somebody said they're involved in this lifestyle and that it is easy or a natural piece of their life because they're also a daddy dom. And I was like, no! Sucked back into the diaper lovers. I can't escape them! And okay, to reiterate that this is probably more closely tied to sex and kink than the Christian domestic dominance people will probably like to admit, is that I went to one of these, like, educational websites, and they don't have blog posts anymore. Losers. Blogs are for losers. They have podcasts, like us cool people, but they're all behind a paywall. You have to be a member to get them, which I was not going to give them money.
Fuck
but
no.
I did take a screenshot of a word cloud he had of the topics covered on his website. So Laura, tell me, what are some of the very surprising topics you might find on a Christian spiritual website?
BDSM, cunnilingus, dominant sex, fellatio, masturbation, oral sex, sexual denial, sexual fantasy, sexual refusal, sodomy. These are not words that I would associate with Christian websites generally.
Yeah, no, this is how to live your holiest life, right? and I got an inkling that maybe the wife's spiritual wellness was not the main priority when I stumbled upon this website, and I saw that he had one little handy-dandy resource called A Wife's Guide to Receiving Spankings and Rough Sex. Somehow I feel that Jesus has left the chat.
So this is interesting because, you come in with this whole thing is like, this is domestic abuse. And then everything gets a little muddied. And this reminds me of a sex cult that somebody told me about very recently.
The propositioned you for.
Yeah. And it was all about human advancement and getting to know yourself and expanding your mind. But the end goal of this institution, quote unquote, was bisexual group sex. And as a very wise friend of mine said, why do you have to make it weird? Why don't we just say, so you guys want to have an orgy? Like
why does it have to have the religious element, right?
Yeah. Why do we have to put this wrapper on it? And because the wrapper somehow makes it creepier than it actually is. If you just came in and said, I am into BDSM and I want to spank my wife, it's like, okay, you do you. And then if we said, we just want to have orgies, she's like, okay, well, you do you. You know what I mean? Like when you put this wrapper around it, it makes everything fucking weird.
Right? Like, I want to play with power and control, but I can't just say that, so I have to add Jesus into the equation.
Yeah.
And, would it be the weirdest thing that people have done in the name of Jesus? No. People have done all kinds of ridiculous shit for, like, religious enlightenment or spirituality. Like, people fast for religious purposes.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I'm sure that's a lovely experience. Self-flagellation. I remember watching the fucking Da Vinci Code as a kid and being like, oh. And honestly, this is sounding a little bit familiar, right? Because have we not heard about the spiritual experiences of some of the topics in our previous episodes? I can't escape it. The first one that comes to mind is, of course, the regression therapy of the adult baby diaper lovers that they feel when they're writhing around in wet diapers that are locked on their body. Also, like way back to our BDSM episode where we talked about the psychology of BDSM and how like this focus on power and humiliation and pleasure help the practitioners or those who are participating in it experience like these intense, like cathartic emotions.
I remember that.
But this idea of like being submissive and like handing over that control, it can let you escape from your problems, and like having somebody in that power position can make you feel safe and protected. Not to mention, of course, the endorphin rush that comes from having like physical harm done to your body, right?
Yeah, and I remember that from the research, people saying it was a spiritual experience, like kind of an outer body thing. Personally, I think that has something to do with like some sort of kind of trauma-induced brain shutdown, right? That people have decided that they liked. You do you. If that makes you feel good, do it. And if it's safe, it's consensual, you do you, but call a spade a spade. I feel like we should put that on my fucking tombstone. Call a spade a spade.
Yeah. So, in theory, when we started our BDSM episode, we're like, what the heck do subs get out of it, right? Like, it just seems like you're this punching bag for somebody else to enact their fantasies upon. But in reality, there are more people who consider themselves to be subs in the world, and the subs are the ones who want to play more often. They're the ones who are initiating the scenes in the play more than doms. Yeah. I mean, that comes up, I feel like, again and again in our research. There has to be some kind of human element to handing over power that we just found cathartic. Maybe it is reverting ourselves back to our childhood where you didn't have to make any decisions. You just had somebody else do it all for you. And we've seen this again and again and again in our research, whether it's from tying people up or putting on a diaper, right? Or now signing up to be a lifelong indentured servant.
For Jesus.
But that comes down to it. The main core of it is this lifestyle domestic abuse, which what a lot of people, when they hear about the situation, they jump right to that.
That was certainly my first inclination, but the more and more we've dug into it, maybe not.
Yeah. When you hear a man beats his wife on her ass for not doing what he wants, when he spanks her through her tears, that's your first gut reaction is, what the fuck? That's abusive.
Yeah.
But to understand if it's abuse or if it's not abuse, we have to look at what, abuse is, domestic abuse is. And this idea that it's wrong to beat the shit out of your wife is very new, unfortunately.
Very new.
It was not until the 1920s that the last states made it illegal to beat your wife. Like the 1920s. That is 100 years ago. And as we transitioned out of that and into the mid-century, where you can't give your wife a black eye for smarting off, we saw a transition to this spanking of women, right? As opposed to just slapping them in the face. And it had a hold on us. But it wasn't until over 50 years after the last states made beating your wife illegal that we actually started even taking it seriously, right? It was not until the 1970s that we even started considering domestic abuse as a serious thing.
I did just listen to a podcast about that, and it's really fucking bleak about the 1970s when actually people started to care. Like, you can call the cops and they would actually do something about it and bring it to court and it be a thing. And that's a 50-year gap. So if 100 years ago it was actually illegal, well, it was 50 years ago that anybody actually gave a fuck. That is nothing, right? 50 years is not even a lifetime. So you can see how we still struggle with this as a society.
Because, I mean, we are hitting middle age, right? And, like, our parents were children in the 70s. It's very possible that they probably knew people whose friends' moms were being slapped around or their kids were. Like you said, it's not that long ago. We're not that far removed from it. Now we just wrap it up in this whole package. But like you said, it's super discouraging. It's bleak. And is this Christian domestic discipline just a evolving methodology to exert this physical dominance over your property? Oh, I mean, wife. And honestly, that's what it looks like on the surface, right? But I'm actually going to flip the script here based off what we were talking about the catharticness of that submissive mind space. Because if you dig a little deeper, you might find that the women might actually be the ones in charge. Because a reoccurring theme that I saw on the subreddits, and as I read through the comments on that guy's website, his blogs or whatever, his podcast blogs, a reoccurring theme that I saw again and again is that the women in the relationship were the ones instigating this arrangement. They were asking for just this discipline system, which sounds absurd until you think about it and you realize it means your husband has to fucking pay attention to you, right? He has to make sure he is listening to what you're saying. He's looking at you to know how you're spending your day, your energy, your money. You can't spank a wife for overspending on a new dress if you don't notice what she's wearing.
Or if you can't spank a wife for a disrespectful tone if he just doesn't straight listen when she talks.
Or if you're not interacting, if he's just ignoring you. And those times where you have disrespected or all those things that you've done wrong, they might even come with their own little dopamine hits. One woman in the comments described the excitement she felt when her husband would say, "Hey, we're going to talk about that later," knowing that she was going to get spanked. She would be on pins and needles the whole day waiting for them to have that conversation.
Go on.
And then another thing that I saw within the Christian domestic discipline is they have these things where the husband receives the wife's confessions, where at the end of the day,
I was Catholic. This is so fucking sacrilegious. Fuck off.
It's not that kind of here are my sins. It's these are the rules that I broke. And so at the end of the day, he sits and hears you talk about what you did wrong. But guess what? That means he's sitting down and talking to you, baby.
Jeez. This makes women sound so sad. Please pay attention to me. Please, please, please. And fuck off. I don't want you to pay attention to me. Fuck off. Do the dishes.
The real winning thing here might be when you have your husband's complete physical and mental attention during your discipline times, especially if that then leads into something sexy, right? If you're people are on the internet being well, spanking shouldn't be tied to sex because it's a punishment. And then you get all kinds of weird shit in there, because this person was this was my first time being spanked, and then we had amazing sex after. You mean it was probably the first time your husband actually, paid some attention to you and didn't just, pump instantly with zero foreplay in the missionary position? that's like some of the reasons why women might be into it. But then also like even on the most vanilla level, it includes just sitting down with your husband and discussing how the house should be run. So everybody has clear expectations. Everybody's working together as a team. What is more sexy than communication?
I mean, yeah, that makes a house run smoothly.
I feel like they just need some kind of structure. Like most humans need some kind of structure to be productive.
And some sort of adult interaction.
Well, that too, right? If you've just been trapped in your house all day, all of a sudden you're like, well, it doesn't matter if you're spanking me. At least I am interacting with another human.
Yeah.
So it gets to the point where like you can see like maybe that this does benefit a woman, especially when you add in like the catharticness of the sub mindset, handing over control. And this is what I saw again online. Not only that women were the ones instigating it, but they were complaining that the men in their lives weren't fulfilling their ends of the bargain. They'd be like, we want to do domestic discipline, but my husband doesn't keep up with it. He'll say he's going to spank me for something, but then he doesn't spank me. Or they're literally asking for spankings, being like, you know what? I just really need to be spanked today. And that makes me ask, if you are being shoehorned into this by your wife, are they submitting to you, you little earth god? Or are they really the ones calling the shots and getting you to participate in something that they enjoy?
Well, that's certainly
under the guise.
Like. You're so powerful. You're so powerful.
I need to be dominated. You know, like I need your power, but you has to be in this specific way that I enjoy. And it's just so funny how it's packaged in this one way, but then once you start digging, you see it entirely different. Like, are you being submissive if you are dictating how you will submit?
No, totally.
But I thought this was like a fun little feminist spin at the end, right? Again, it's just funny that it ends up being not as nefarious as you think it is and almost empowering in a way. Christian domestic discipline. So when it comes down to it, in my opinion, is it abuse? Probably not. But it's definitely also not this alpha man thing that they make it out to be, especially if a woman is nagging her husband into doing it.
Yeah.
And I think this is best put on an AMA post on a Reddit, by user the_purple_owl. And they said, it's an abuse under a fancy name, so abusive and misogynistic men can pretend they're not being abusive and misogynistic and can more easily brainwash their wives into believing their abusive actions are acceptable. That's if you are, like, in that very Christian situation where you're using God to push it on people. But again, I just don't believe a woman, I don't know, people end up in all kinds of horrible situations. What do I know? But I think most truly, as the Purple Owl says, or it's a kink for people who are afraid to admit they're into kink and who are using the language of religion to somehow justify their kink to tell themselves it's acceptable since they've been taught it's not. And I think that's where probably most of these people who are actively participating and posting about it online fall into that second category.
I think that Purple Owl nailed it. This perfectly sums up the whole thing. Either it's domestic abuse or it's BDSM under a new Christian name. I hope it's the latter far more than it's the former. Certainly if you're posting online about it, right? If you're a wife who's posting online about it, if you're a man that's posting online about it, especially on Reddit, like it's not truly abuse. It's something that this is agreed upon, like signature, like we're living a BDSM lifestyle under a different name.
And if it is that first category, there's no way it's staying to just spanking, right? There's there's going to be a lot more other red flags getting into those more controls. And he's not just going to be hitting you on your behind in an agreed upon setting, right? It's going to be other kinds of physical abuse.
Yeah, totally. And I mean, if you want to think that your kink is ordained by God himself, so be it. I mean, whatever fantasies we tell ourselves, right? If you think that you terrorizing your wife is ordained by God, God help you.
But is it holy if you have a rock hard boner while doing it? I don't know.
And then your wife is like, ooh.
Yeah, then that you're getting into Satan's playground there, baby. Fornicators.
Baby.
Fornicators.
This episode has been a journey. It was like, at first I was like, what the fucking fuck, especially with all your talk about like how you lost faith in humanity. But then we go down and I'm like, no, wait, you're right. You convinced me. This is just kink under a new name.
And I think that's a good place to leave it, right? Like you said, this was a journey. I did set it up very negatively, and I did have a lot of negative feelings while researching it, but it ended in a better spot than I ever would have guessed.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's what we can take out of life, is just take this one little win and go back to our shitty reality and our shitty election and
oh man, don't even get me fucking started. We'll talk about that after we end.
Folks, thank you so much for listening. As we talked about at the top, if you want to help us out, give us a subscribe, give us a rating, give us a review, comment, tell us your thoughts, let us know all your spanking fantasies.
Tell your friends if they are big weirdos like yourself and will be into these kinds of conversations. Send them along.
And thank you, Time Suck friends. We're glad you're here.
What is big deal? Oh, God,
big
that's
deal.
terrible.
What is? I don't know the reference.
I'll tell you. It's fine.
I'm going to listen now. Maybe. Okay. Don't forget. Always remember, stay curious, and don't stop marching to the beat of your own drum. Spanking for Jesus! Spanking for Jesus! That's a summer short, just an hour and 17 minutes.